Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of BA320. Hopefully, you enjoyed your first week, and I want to start off by thanking everyone for their participation in the discussion questions. As we are moving along, I want to do a quick recap of last week. If you have, or what, excuse me, was expected last week. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. But again, you had your discussion questions, your lecture response, and your homework. If you did not get your homework in, please work on getting that in. I can still accept it. It's just deducted, or I'll have 20% deducted. So if you have any questions about that, again, let me know. I am always more than willing to answer questions for you. As we move along, let's talk about week 2 and what is going to be expected. You'll see that a lot of the weeks are pretty similar. There is one extra thing that is due this week during week 2. So you're going to have your discussion question here, your lecture response, your assignment, and then there's also a quiz that is due this week. So the discussion question, again, the initial post is due by Wednesday. 2 responses are due by Sunday. So let's look at the discussion question. This week, the discussion question talks about IPOs. So initial public offerings. I don't know how familiar everyone is with those. They've probably at least heard the term, but maybe they have no idea what it is. And if you don't, that's fine. That's what we're here for. We are going to teach you about that. So you've probably heard it maybe on the news or in movies. Movies talk a lot about IPOs if you've ever seen anything. TV shows, commercials, everybody talks about going public. That is basically the same thing. Showing an initial public offering is the first time that a company is selling their stock to the public. That's why they call it going public. So as you're going through, you're going to read about IPOs, and the book has some really good information about IPOs, what they are, what it takes to go public, and the benefits of it. Going public is a long, drawn-out process. It's not something that a company wakes up on Monday and says, hey, let's go public, and they're done by Friday. There is a lot of legwork that goes into it. They have to develop a prospectus. They have to decide how much their company is worth. They have to decide what they are going to try to sell the shares for. They have to get a company, they have to hire a company to help them go public, work out a cost benefit with them, or a benefit for that company to pay them. Maybe they're going to pay them cash. Maybe they're going to give them stock. There's different ways that they can pay them, but there is a lot that really goes into it. So as you go through again, make sure that as I've mentioned, your initial post is done by Wednesday. 2 responses are due by Sunday. Something on here that I want to bring up to make sure that everybody is aware of, there's a thing right here. Your initial post needs to be between 70 and 100 words. Make sure that you are developing your thought process and supporting it. And then your 2 responses need to be at least 2 or 3 sentences. 30 words is a good rule of thumb. Don't just say excellent post or yes, I agree or fantastic, something like that. If that's all it is, you will not be given any credit. Make sure to have meaning behind what you are saying. So that's what's due for the discussion. Next, you'll have your lecture response. You're watching the lecture. Post your response to that. Make sure it's around 150 words at least, and that you talk about the lecture, what we talked about, what you learned, different things like that. Next, you're going to have your assignment. So actually, before I get to the assignment, let's talk about the quiz. So the quiz is due by Sunday night, and I believe it's just 5 questions. It's not that bad, and it's obviously open book because you have your book. So even if I said it was closed book, people probably still use their book. So it is timed, but hopefully it's a way to help boost your grade. Now let's dig into the assignment and what is due this week. Okay, there we go. So this week we are going to talk about stocks and bonds. This is where a lot of people make their money. So you're going to do a comparison and contrast of stocks and bonds. So you're going to say, this is what a stock is, this is what a bond is. Stocks offer this benefit while bonds don't, yet bonds offer this benefit while stocks don't. One of the key things that you're going to want to research and talk about probably is risk. I'm not saying you have to talk about risk, but that is one of the big things, or one of the big differences between the two. So with stocks, you generally are going to have a lot more risk. I've invested a little bit with stocks. I have an account with a company called Scottrade. Not that I'm giving them a free plug, I'm just saying who I've used in the past. And I learned some very hard lessons, unfortunately, when I was investing. I invested in a small clothing company that had just gone public. Thought it was going to be great. I bought it low. I think I bought it, at around $1.50 or so. I held on to it for a while. It was up to $3. And, there's a saying out there that talks about how pigs get slaughtered. So there's other parts to go to that, but we'll focus on that. I was essentially a pig thinking, oh, look, I doubled my money. And I was just out of college. I only had a few $100s in there probably. So it's not like I was making bank off of it. But I was like, man, the sky's the limit for these guys. As quickly as that stock doubled from $1.50 to $3, it went from $3 down to about 20 or 30 cents. So it collapsed really quickly. I didn't sell thinking, oh, it's going to come back. It's going to come back. Eventually, the stock was worthless, and I lost my few $100 that I had put into it. Stocks are very risky. Now, if I would have put a few $100s into GE or, say, Apple, I probably would have, if I would have bought Apple, I probably would have only bought one share because their shares were probably a few $100s at the time. Or if I would have bought GE, I don't know what the stock price was at the time, but those are more secure companies. They're bigger. They have a better foundation. That doesn't mean you're not going to lose money. Apple could still go out of business in 2 years. So could GE. However, that is highly unlikely. So when you buy bonds, your money is generally a lot safer. The problem is with bonds, you generally don't get a very good return because you don't have the risk reward there. That's not to say that you can't go out and buy junk bonds or other things like that. And bonds are rated. You'll see as you go through this, they're going to rate them, for ABC, things like that. And you can buy those junk bonds where you're going to get higher returns, but there's also a high likelihood that you could lose your money with those. So go out, you can do a comparison and contrast, and you're going to see some similarities on both, but you're also going to see some vast differences on both. So as you go through, be sure to write those down and talk about them. And then one of the things that I would like to see on this as you're going through is to give your opinion. Don't just go out and have column A and column B to do your comparison and your comparison where you're going to have these are similarities, these are differences. Give me your opinion. If you give me your opinion, that's going to show me that you are understanding the concepts that we are talking about. You can say, stocks are less risky, or excuse me, are riskier, while bonds are less risky. And this is how it would go into an investment strategy or things like that. Just make sure that it's clear what your differences are or what your similarities are. And then right here on this last sentence, it says how each would appeal to different segments of investors. This is where you're going to give your opinion, as I was saying. You can talk about younger investors versus older investors. You can talk about your own life if you would like to say, you are an investor. You can go out and you can buy stocks and bonds. So talk about your life if you like, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I am a dad of 4 with a mortgage and a job. I can't really go out and take huge risks. That is not going to work for me. So I need to make sure that I play it fairly safe. So as you're going through and you're looking at those things, try to talk about how they're going to apply to everybody. Then again, right here, you're going to see it needs to be 2 to 3 pages, typed, double-spaced, in an APA format with a title page. Again, the title page does not count as one of those pages. And then once you get that uploaded, I will get it graded as quickly as I can. Again, this is due by Sunday. If you don't get it in by Sunday, you can turn it in late, but you automatically lose 20%. So please try to get it in. You might think 20% does not sound like much, but 20% can play a huge role in your ending grade at the end of class. So that's what you're going to be covering with your paper this week. Let's go back to the homepage and see what else there is. So we've already talked about the quiz a little bit. You've got a video here for test taking tips, and then also your job resources. So those are the main things that we are going to cover. Again, we're going to go over risk and reward a lot. You're going to really dig into stocks. There's a lot of information out there. One site that I use a lot when I'm looking at stocks, and you can even find some bond information on there, I believe, is Yahoo Finance. But you can use, I'm sure NBC has a finance site. Like I said, I use Scottrade. They have a finance site. You can go to E-Trade. There's dozens and dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of websites out there that are going to give you information on that. So feel free to look outside of just the book and what we have listed here. Just make sure that you cite your sources, as always, and then that you have it in the correct format. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. I will respond as quickly as I can. I try to get back to you within 24 hours. If you try to call me during the day, I generally will not respond until I get home at night. Because as I mentioned in my bio, I am a supervisory auditor for DCAA. So generally during the day, I don't have time to answer my cell phone, or I don't get reception sometimes in some of the places I'm at. So, but I will respond as quick as I can. I try to respond within 24 hours to phone calls or emails or texts, whatever it may be. So thank you for a great week 1. Let's have an awesome week 2, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.